Welcome to the BFR podcast. This is Dr. Mike DeBord. We've got a special guest today. Excited to hear from Dr. Patrick Porter. I've known Dr. Porter now probably for about 4 or 5 years. I was introduced to his incredible BrainTap technology. We're going to talk about that. But Dr. Porter's also a BFR advocate. He loves his B3 bands, and nobody's better at understanding how that can impact the brain. We're going to listen to him today and get some insightful information. Dr. Porter, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dr. Mike. It's always nice to see you here. I know we see each other out there on the trail all the time, and I always have my B3 bands with me because it's just so easy to do. I mean, when you go to these hotels, you don't ever know really, are they going to have a good workout room for you? And this one, I know every day I'm going to have it right in my hotel room. I'm going to be able to put them on, do my workout. And if I can do it down at the gym, sometimes I'll go down there and do it too, just to a little variety. But there's some big things, and I think everyone should know about this. It's especially if you're like me. I'm 63 years old now, so I'm not looking to break any records in weightlifting anymore. I'm not trying to push my body to the limits. I'm just trying to keep myself really active and be there for my grandkids. And I think this is something that when I saw what it did for people, getting them out of wheelchairs, I was just, wow. We got to get this out to the public.
Awesome. Well, let's come back to the BFR because all of our listeners are going to want to hear about BrainTap. Now, when I go to these events, I've got a busy booth, but there's always one other booth that's as busy or even busier. And you walk by and these people have these white futuristic masks on that have cover the eyes and they cover the ear, and everybody's, they've got 15 or 20 chairs and they're always full. So Dr. Porter, tell us about BrainTap, your history, and how you got here with this incredible technology.
Sure. Yeah, I was kind of brought in through the side door, if you will. My mother got in through nutrition. There were 9 of us in our family, a good Catholic family, and we embarrassed our parents all the time. We were, hyperactive. They go, oh, the Porters are here, let's make sure everything's nailed down. And we realized that, hey, we needed to change our nutrition. And then they got us into sports. And I think that when we got into sports and getting physically fit, and then my dad got some help doing something called the Silva method, which was a meditation process. And the Catholic Church actually promoted it because my dad was unfortunately, he was a very gifted alcoholic. He could get, everything could be going great. And for whatever reason, he would go take off for a week and leave 9 kids, if you can believe that. And what he found out through this process of this meditation process, which was, thank God the Catholic Church brought it to us, is that it helped him to realize that he was not trying to get high by drinking alcohol. He was trying to get balanced. And then, of course, we now know that brain fitness is more than just thinking about it. You can't just talk about it. You got to have, number one, I would say you can't outthink a bad diet, but you also have to have movement. You have to get your brain involved with the body. That's why physical fitness, why I'm a big advocate of movement and getting the body working. The brain doesn't work without that. So we've always been big proponents in nutrition, movement, and brain fitness. And so when you see people at the shows, it looks like they're all passed out, like they're watching some virtual reality movie or something like that. But really what's happening is the neurology of our body is being retrained. Everything, we're here, you and I are on this on this podcast right now because our ancestors had really good visual, auditory, and kinesthetic acuity, which means they lived. There's a lot of others genetic lines that didn't make it, right? I just came back from Italy in Rome, and they have the people in the gladiators taking people out, taking whole organizations out, whole bloodlines. Think about it. But we're here because our bloodline made it. So there's something about the way we perceive, hear, experience life. And what's happening in our world today, unfortunately, and why technologies like B3 and BrainTap are so important, is that we need to look at technology to save us from technology destroying us. When you think about, we can go, just put in perspective, if you and I were to go back in time to the 70s, I'm sure at a holiday time, you're playing Trivial Pursuit and you could have the internet in your pocket, but nobody knew you had the internet in your pocket. You'd be the smartest guy on earth, right? You could just key in anything. But that knowledge does not mean power. And what I mean by power is Can you get up off the couch and go do something? Can you motivate your family to live a good life? Can you be healthy and vibrant? Are you going to be a contributor to your society, or are you going to be a detriment? And I think what's happening now is technologies like this, like BrainTap, what they're doing is we're teaching them that they can rewire their brain. That when my dad was growing up, he didn't have a chance. Both his parents were addicted. My grandmother, God bless her soul, she used to run a hospital in Battle Creek, Michigan, but she was addicted to every pharmaceutical, narcotic. They sent her home at 63 years old and said, Sally's going to die. She lived to be 93 years old. She never took another prescription medicine the rest of her life. The prescription medicine wasn't keeping her alive. It was actually poisoning her. Mm-hmm. And so what we have to realize is that we have this incredible pharmacy in our brain. And this pharmacy is more powerful than Walgreens, Walmart, any drugstore on earth. It can dispense any number of neurochemicals at a moment's thought. But the problem is nobody told us how to think those thoughts. We were told, hey, act like dad, act like mom, act like brother, sister, father, preacher, teacher. All these people were telling us what to do. Now we have technology like BrainTap, where we can focus on our own inner awareness. We can become self-aware, which means, hey, we can take control of our thoughts, our actions, and our beliefs. Nobody can control us unless we want them to. And it's hard. When my kids were growing up, now they're 40 and 41, and I have grandkids that are 13 and 10. But when they were younger, it was hard for me to get them to understand that you control your happiness. There's a sphere of energy around you that you control. You can control your mindset, you can control your physiology, you can control your psychology. And when you start controlling that, you basically bring your own weather to any situation in life. And, I really, for me, because I was a big athlete and things like that, so I always looked at people that when they always looked at outside sources as the reason they were successful or not, I knew they were never going to be successful. Because just like an egg is destroyed when it's from the outside in, right? When we crack an egg to make a breakfast. But if that chick breaks the egg from the inside, we got life. So we've got to find systems that work within our innate nature, that unlock our physiology, our psychology, the life that we're destined to live. Because right now we're being controlled, not intentionally. I don't think there's some overlord that's trying to do this. I just think convenience. What they call the law of convenience. If it's easier to do this, people are probably going to do it. Yeah. Even if it's, the people that are the most successful in life, they say, are those that know what to do and know it's hard, but do it anyway. Mm-hmm. The ones that take, oh, well, it's the government's fault, or it's my body's I'm aging. So, whatever. They think that their body or their mind or their brain, right now there's two big fears in the world right now that we're dealing with. And you and I are both on the forefront of those. Number one is people are afraid they're going to lose their brain, mm-hmm. right? They're going to lose their wits. Well, yeah, if you give away all your power of cognitive thinking to other people, like your television, your radio, your TV, your computer, your smartphone. I mean, so many times I hear people say, oh no, where's my phone? That's my brain. Mm-hmm. No, that's not your brain. Mm-hmm. Your brain is what's in here, but how did you work your brain today? And people think that I can work my brain by doing jigsaw puzzles, Sudoku, and all these other things, which are good. I mean, I think they're really great, but there's a big difference between, in fact, in the world of psychology, they call it transcendence rather than what we know as analytical. There are a lot of analytical people that are super smart, but they don't transcend situations. Like they get put into situations where they can't think because they're used to having X plus X equals Y, instead of being able to think outside the box. So I think what BrainTap does and what you're seeing those people do is we're using light, sound, and vibration. And we'll get into, I don't want to get too much into science because they can always go look me up online and they can hear all about it. But the reality is, and I'll put it in the form of exercise since we're dealing with people that want to be physically fit. You are a mitochondria machine. I loved it at Halloween. There was a guy online, and I told him, I said, I need to get that picture because I'm going to use it in my talks. He says, this is my human outfit. I'm really a mitochondria. Hmm. And that's really what we are, right? So yes. At the very core, that mitochondria is looking for something called ATP. Mm-hmm. Think of ATP as the currency for your body. It helps us to heal, helps us to think, without that, we do not exist. And when we're born, when you and I, Michael, were born, our brain was functioning at about 18.1 volts. So think about like you have a bulb in your room, it's 18.1 volts. Now, fast forward, it's 30 years, you're 30 years old now. The average brain is 10.1.
Oh, geez.
What just happened to our brain? Our brain's still there, the hardware's still there, but now we don't have the energy to light up the room. You know, when they say that in every crystal, there's a prism of light. You know, when you shine a light through a crystal and you see the rainbow, there's a rainbow in everything. So within you, within everybody listening to this, there's a rainbow. But if you don't get the light, that's the ATP. If you don't get that light to broadcast through it, nobody knows your brilliance. Because if you don't have the energy, the stamina to think, to act, to respond, to be who you are. You know, when somebody says, I don't have self-esteem, I say, no, you don't have the energy. It has nothing to do. Don't think it's a psychological problem. The quitters out there in the world think it's all psychological. Oh, poor me, my brain does this. And I'm a psychologist. But I'm going to tell you right now, that's all hogwash. If you don't get your physiology right, you can never, ever in the history of the world get your psychology right.
Sounds like it's a use it or lose it. If we don't lose our muscle in our, our 40s and 50s, we start to lose it. Sounds like the same thing happens with the brain, but it loses voltage versus our muscles losing strength and mass. Is that kind of a
Yeah,
similar...
most people don't realize you are a thinking machine. Your brain is up here. This is the brain we think about, but there's a brain in our heart. 40,000 neutrino cells. There's a brain actually in every cell of your body. That neurological activity it's not just contained to like what we see on in a physiology chart. You are an energy being. And if you're not broadcasting and receiving that information in the form, that's where mitochondria, that's what my joke was about earlier, that maybe hopefully everybody's going to do a little research if they didn't understand that. But we are 54% mitochondria. So if that mitochondria is only functioning at 50%, guess what we are? We're 50% of who we could be.
Yeah,
so how do we activate that?
Our energies, which you call electricity in millivolts, we might think of as our energy. Our energy's drained. And what do we experience physically? Are we tired?
Oh, yes. I mean, think about it. If you have your muscles, if you have strong, healthy muscles, we all know people that were negative. I mean, they were depressed, and then they went to the gym, they started working out, they started getting physically fit, their brain got right. But that's that BDNF, that the brain-derived neurotropic factors. I mean, the brain, we are only where we are today in our civilization because of physical exercise, muscles. You know, and if we sit down, you know, that's the problem with success. A lot of people think, oh, success is I get to sit on the porch, watch everybody else do the work. Well, what they realized was if you let everybody else do the work, pretty soon they're going to be getting all the benefits. You know, they're going to be, you know, you get to leave everything you did in your whole life to your heirs. Well, I'm here. I told my heirs, I said, I hope I leave you something, but I'm hoping on the last breath that I'm still there playing with you, you know, full of energy. And I know that with things like what we do with B3 and what we do with BrainTap, we need to keep our wits about us, and we need to have ways to maximize our muscle growth. Nobody has time right now to go to the gym for 4 hours. I mean, if you do, more power to you. And I was just at an event in Vegas where they had the natural bodybuilders. You know, these people are dedicated. I mean, this is their whole life. They spend their whole life in the gym. They're working out, and guess what they use also?
Yeah.
B3 bands.
Yeah.
They're doing everything else, but they're still doing that. They also use BrainTap. So in the process, because people who succeed in life know they want that one edge, that one little bit of edge. So today we can either let life happen to us, or we can let life happen through us. So my big goal in life, and even what happened with my dad, was my dad didn't realize that he wasn't trying to get drunk. That's it. In my background is addiction therapy. So when I first went in, of course, I thought, oh, you got to diagnose somebody. They got a problem. You're an addict. Well, guess what? Everyone's an addict. It's just, what are you addicted to? Are you addicted to healthy things, positive? Are you addicted to being in love with your family, your friends, your coworkers, building a great community, a great life. If that's what you're addicted to, then more power to you, because we have this dopamine response in our brain, right? It's natural. It's not, when we try to say it's not natural, that's when we get in trouble. This is a natural drive we have. But the problem is nobody told us that you never get a payoff. So that's why things like B3 and BrainTap, these are things we need to do every day. It's not something you just do.
When people put this on, Doc, so, for our users, and I want you to go check out BrainTap. We'll put the links in at the end of the presentation to learn more. So, Doc, tell people what happens when they put this on. They're hearing things, they're seeing lights, and they're feeling a little vibration.
So let's put it in perspective. I'll put it into perspective for everyone. Let's say you just did your B3 workout. You're feeling good. You've got that high that you'll get in 20 minutes, right? Now, guess what? You could amplify all of those benefits in something called neuroplasticity. Because you have an hour of time after your workout. We've proven this over and over again. There's 1 hour after workout. That's why the B12 people, now they call them TBRX, Tom Brady's group that works with us with his recovery wear. We know that recovery happens not when you're doing the work, it's when you don't do the work. What are you doing when you're not doing the work? So you just did the workout, you've just created all this great neurotropic factors, your brain's doing its thing. Now we can use science using light. So your eyes are closed. This light is a frequency response. So when we go to the ocean, if you and I were sitting next to, let's say we're in LA, we're sitting next to the ocean, we're just sitting there relaxing, and pretty soon, we go, I feel kind of tired, I'm going to go to sleep. Well, that's because the ocean has a resonant frequency of 10 hertz. That 10 hertz happens to be alpha. Alpha then correspondingly has a neurotropic factors that are released called acetylcholine and other, things that make us feel good. When you're in love with somebody or you're doing things you love to do, these are the kind of things, oxytocin, your brain just starts to feel good. So we can trigger those with just light stimulus. Now, what we did is there's also sound, so you're listening with your earphones too. So you got the earphones on, and we have certain frequencies. And every cell of our body has something called a mirror neuron. Now, in sports, most people know that. Like you see somebody playing a sport, and we've all seen it on TV. Unfortunately, you see somebody get hit, and it's a nasty hit, and you feel it. You squint. You feel like, oh man, that was my knee. I just felt that. That's because we have mirror neurons. That's happening all the time, not just when we see something so atrocious, like somebody getting their knee blown out. But we're all the time looking at our environment, going, "Hey, is this a safe place for me?" And our cells are 100% of the time evaluating our environment. And it's not just one thing. People always go, Dr. Porter, what's the one thing? It's everything. That's why we have the big boulders we can move. Like we can keep ourselves physically strong. We can keep ourselves mentally. We can keep a good mindset. Those are the big boulders we need to keep us going where we want to go. If not, we'll go anywhere, right? We don't have any northern star. We don't know where we're going. So with BrainTap, you're using light, sound, and vibration to basically take a mental vacation. Imagine if you could we can't take you to Miami, anytime you want just to go to the beach and celebrate. But guess what? You could put the headset on. We could have the light, the sound, the vibration, the frequencies, the same cues that our ancestors used when they were walking along outside, because our ancestors walked outside. If the sun was out, we were outside. We were walking, we were breathing, we were interacting with nature. Those interactions were actually, they call it forest bathing now, because we have to have a name for it, because we don't do it naturally anymore. So our brain is looking for these cues to keep us healthy. Because we need this. It's like having a good diet. There's not one good diet. It's a variety of things we need to do in our diet. The same thing's true with our thoughts. The same thing's true with our activities. So with BrainTap, what we did is we use light, sound, and vibration to mimic nature. And I just use the example of the ocean, but it could be the mountains. Yeah. When you go to the mountains and people go, man, I really relax. I like going to I like Colorado, when you go up to the mountain, the tree line, and you're just sitting up there, it's so calm. That's because at that level, that mountain is actually resonating a frequency of 7.8 hertz frequency. That happens to be theta. You know what people pay to go to theta? I mean, that's the most, right now, before COVID, that was the most researched neurotransmitter, GABA. Because when you're in theta, your brain produces the most GABA. So GABA is a precursor to something called DMT. So if people are looking for those spiritual experiences, and it's no coincidence that we say in psychology, go, I had a mountaintop experience. Because when you have those mountaintop experiences, you have those high theta experiences. Now, what I believe is you don't have to wait for those mountaintop experiences to come to you. You can go to the mountain. You can prepare yourself, your physiology to do that. So what we tell anybody who comes through my programs here, they know they've got to do something with their physical body. I always recommend the blood flow restriction bands mainly because they're so easy. And I'm working with people that aren't, when I'm working with even the college athletes and the professional athletes, I say, why wouldn't you want to do it? You mean you're gonna just intensify everything. You can't blood dope or you get in trouble. But guess what? Your body can release these things naturally. And you can trigger them. So the same way that the BFR bands work for the body, we can trigger for the brain. So we all, there's when we go through our life, there's always going to be stressors. If I could somehow wave a magic wand and there'd be no stress in the world today, first of all, we wouldn't be around because we're only here because of stressors. Stressors aren't always bad, but the reality is that we wouldn't like it. They actually did a survey, and I love to tell this to people. There's actually a report where they took mice, they gave them everything they wanted. Those mice lived an average of over 30% less than mice that had to struggle to get what they wanted. We're designed to actually need to have a little bit of struggle. It doesn't have to be so much that it hurts our spirit, but we need to push ourselves. That we need physical stress, we need mental stress, we need emotional stress. We need friends that challenge us, that don't just say yes all the time, that challenge our beliefs. And just what happened through politics. I mean, used to be a fun thing to do, but now it's become too what they call political. But in the process, it used to be, didn't matter what you were after the election. Hey, we're Americans. We're going to do what we're going to do. I think people have lost track of that in this world because they've become so myopic, and I think social media has done that. But in the process of what we need, we're thinking about BrainTap, is that for me, I've written 9 books, but the one book that I always tell people to start with is called Awaken the Genius, and it's my life story in how I went from being a held back kid in 2nd grade to learning how to use my mind. And of course, my dad was a big sports guy, so I had to also have sports goals. So, and I became a 3-sport captain and got a scholarship and all of that. But the reality was, I just did that to make him happy. I just wanted to get out of the house and play, but once I started to use my mind in a way that I could pretend that these things were happening, those neurons, I didn't know, we didn't have the science back then in the 70s like we do today. Now we have science that says, hey, when I visualize something, my physiology doesn't know the difference between real or imagined. Your body is literally rehearsing the things as if you're doing them for real. So when they say, when you've done it in your mind, you've done it in physical reality, you have. And there's not a professional athlete I know that I've talked to that doesn't visualize all of their greatest plays before they ever happen.
Yeah,
they knew they were going to happen. They didn't question it. It was with certainty. And I think that what we do with BrainTap is we help bring more certainty to your life, because right now there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and we don't know what to think about. And if we don't know like where our goals are, our values, and we're goal-striving organisms, right? I mean, if we don't have a purpose, if we don't have a direction to go to, I mean, there's a saying, retire and expire.
Yeah. Because
there's a lot of research that shows the average person doesn't live 5 years past their retirement because they think there's a there. And this is a really important part for everybody listening. There is no there. When somebody says, how long do I need to use the B3 bands for? How long do you want to be physically fit? How long do you want to be able to get on the ground and play with your grandkids? How long do you want to be able to walk across the room without somebody having you in a wheelchair? Then they go, how long do you have to use BrainTap? How long do you want to be stress-free? How long do you want to be a creative thinker? These are things that people think there's an end result. There's no graduation. It's the journey itself is the payoff. I mean, when I see you at the events, you're going crazy. I mean, like you said, our booths are really busy and the time flies, but I'd have it no other way. I mean, when I look at these other people doing their jobs and they're sitting at their booths and they're waiting for people to come by, I'm going, Do something that brings you some passion, something that brings you energy.
Yeah.
And when you start to find that, I think that everyone listening, hopefully, when you find that spark, it doesn't have to be B3 or BrainTap, but you got to find your spark. Whatever that is, then these are things that support it. You know, you don't have to be a BrainTap salesperson, let's say, or a B3 salesperson, but you got to be the best physically fit person you can be, the best mentally, you know, you're influencing people that you don't even know right now. You know, there are people that are looking at you and saying, hey, this is what I'm going to be like when I'm 56. This is what I'm going to be like when I'm 70. This is what I'm going to be like when I'm 90. I want, Mike, you and I, in 30 years, when I'm 93, and we do this again, and I just got done doing my workout, and I'm physically strong, and my brain's still about me, and I say, you know what? We changed the way people looked at aging. Because there is no ancient tradition out there in the universe that keeps the wisdom of the tribe with the youngsters. They keep it with the elders. But there's been too many things gone wrong between being young and have all the money and time and energy. Like they said, youth is wasted on the youth. Youth is wasted on the young, they say, because when you get older, you know, what could I have done if I knew all these things? Well, right here today, you're hearing about it. What could you do if you could spend 20 minutes a day building muscle that could pay you back in years?
Yeah.
What could you do if you mentally prepared yourself to get rid of that excess stress? So that stress that is the number one cause of all illness, 93% of all illness is attributed to stress disorders. What if you had in front of you today 2 solutions that could pave the way for you to start improving your life and the lives of those that you are around? Because as you improve, guess what? That's what my dad, I'm sure he was very self-centered. You know, that's most addicted people are, you know, that are highly addictive like he, and he's very intelligent too. He's a Mensa, you know, he would tell you, if you were with him for 5 minutes, he'd tell you his Mensa score. You know, he was one of those kind of guys. But the thing was, he wasn't smart enough to even get out of his own way until he learned that he had to slow everything down.
Yeah.
Get his mindset right, eating proper foods, physically keeping his body. Now, we didn't have blood flow restriction bands back then. You know, they did, of course, because when I went back and did my research, you know, they had them in Japan. You know, the samurais were doing it. They figured something out. So, I mean, it's like, but now because of technology, these technologies, we can bring it to everyone's home right now. And the nice thing is both of our technologies, I could be using it right now. 20 minutes later, somebody else in my family could be using it.
Yeah.
It's a great piece of technology.
Can you show everybody what the headset looks like? And then I know you just go right to your phone and within,
So
I use mine every week within.
Yeah, when you look at this, there's lights that flash through here. And this is my demo unit, so it's not charged. I have one over here, just a second. The one that I listened to earlier today. I'll turn it on. No, we don't have to do that. But when we turn it on, I'll show you one of the things we do. You'll see the lights in the ears. You might not be able to see them as well, but those lights actually are flickering. And everything in the universe has a rhythm, a cadence, a frequency to it. You know, when you think about going into a big city and maybe you're used to being in the country, you'll feel the vibes. Like people will say, that city's got I just feel anxious, and because that vibration of that city is really a beta vibration, about usually 17 to 23 hertz, which is for people who are used to being in the country where it's 10 hertz. You know, when I live down in North Carolina, so when they talk about the deep South, in South Carolina, when I lived there, people go, hey, I remember my wife trying to get something done. She goes, ma'am, it's sunny out. We're going to go fishing. You know, that's a whole different mindset than I'm from Michigan, you know, where you did it until it was done. You know, there's no waiting or anything like that. So, I mean, we live in a culture now that we need to take, I guess my point is that we have technology sped everything up. If you're sitting there going, man, life happens too fast. I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do these things. Well, I love the Dalai Lama when he said, if you don't have time to meditate, then do it twice a day.
Just do it twice a day. I love Silva. That's interesting. You mentioned Silva.
Yeah,
I've got an application that brokers Silva, and I've been
yeah,
using the Silva technique, right, to visualize, help me visualize and put out there the correct energy that's going to take B3 and all, the people that are doing, help them better and, drive the company bigger. And then I use my BrainTap. One thing I use it for is sleep, right? Because like you said, it introduces that sleep frequency versus the brain running all day long frequency, and then maybe I got some caffeine in me.
yeah. Yeah,
So
let me kind of explain how that works too, because there's a lot of people think it's meditation. It's not really. You could use it for meditation, but it's not that. It's really brain fitness. So in the
mhm.
morning when we wake up, we are supposed to have a brain frequency called SMR, sensory motor rhythm. That's in when we wake up. Remember when you were a kid and nobody had to wake you up? I mean, when the sun was up, you were up, you were ready to go play. Maybe you're going to go play ball with your friends or whatever is going on. You're going to go meet your girlfriends, whatever it was. You were excited. Today was, you didn't have to wait, struggle to go get your coffee. So what I thought was, what's the brain we need to activate? It's actually it's a high alpha. They call it SMR, sensory motor rhythm. It actually is the one that, as we age, unfortunately, diminishes. When we did our research um, in Florida with Dr. Kelly Miller, which by the way he recommends all of the people now we do blood flow restriction bands in the study. But in the study we couldn't do anything other than just brain tap. But what we showed was when we increased that alpha activity in the morning, within 6 weeks, none of them were on the dementia scale anymore because we were
Geez.
waking up their brain without a chemical. When you drink coffee first thing in the morning, which I'm not against coffee, I love coffee, but I don't drink it first thing in the morning and I don't drink it before 10 o'clock in the morning because we have something called the cortisol trough. And we knew this when we were working out, because I was a coach. In the morning, if we could get somebody to do some workout in the morning, you get a much bigger benefit because you have high cortisol and you have norepinephrine, and you have all these different basically neurochemicals that are going to help you build more muscle in the morning than at night when the cortisol trough's flattened and you don't have any energy and you don't really feel like doing it and you'll make excuses why you can't do it anymore. But the whole thing here is that in the morning we need this brainwave called SMR. So that's about 10 minutes. We call it digital coffee. In the middle of the day, like when you're building a business, anybody out there that's building a business, especially entrepreneurs, in the middle of the day about 2 o'clock, you crash and burn.
Yeah.
Well, it's not you. You're not wrong. You're not broken. It's the circadian rhythm of our universe here. I mean, when at 2 o'clock, these bodies were designed to take a nap. We're designed to live in the Serengeti. I don't care where you live today. You can be in St. Paul, Minnesota. Doesn't matter. The genetic history of this body is from the Serengeti.
Hmm.
And what happens at 2 o'clock in the Serengeti is everybody's sleeping. Nobody's running
Yeah.
around trying to catch anybody. It's 115 degrees or 130 degrees. So we need to reboot our system at that time. So we do a full theta reboot. And that reboot, what we showed in our one study we did with Julia Arndt, which was a peak performance study, that we showed that by taking that 20-minute break, every one of the people in the study got 23% more work done by taking 20 minutes off.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to the conscious, the logical linear mind says, no, I got to work harder, got to work harder, got to work harder. No, you got to work smarter, you got to work smarter, you got to work smarter. Just like you got to work out smarter, you got to work out smarter, not work out harder. Harder doesn't mean more muscle growth. Harder doesn't mean you're going to think better.
Hmm.
It means there's technologies out there that can do it. So then at night, what happens is, now remember, in the morning we're going to key them up, we're going to get them going. You got to get that cortisol trough high so you can get as much work done as you can. In the middle of the day, you need to reset that trough. That's what's happening, because in the middle of the day, it's not Queen's tea time. It's not why Starbucks lines are there. It's because our biological system is we're meant to do nothing. We're not supposed to work that hard.
Right.
I mean, if we were out in nature, we wouldn't be out there at dusk. We'd be
No.
finding our way back to the tribal village because we'd be food. If we're out there when it's dark, now we're part of the food chain.
Yeah.
But what do? We turn on our television, we go to our sports, we do whatever, and we just keep pushing. And pretty soon there's going to be an end to our biological, what our biological makeup can give us. And then at night, so now we're all geared up because we've psyched ourselves up. We're doing all these things. We're worried about our business. Maybe we worried about our relationships, whatever's going on, whatever is happening. Well, right now, 2/3 of the world is not sleeping, which to me blows my mind because my partner, when we were traveling across India, he looks at my wife, he goes, Patrick can sleep standing up. And he goes, yeah, he can. Because when you grow up with 9 kids, you took sleep whenever you could get it. You learned how to sleep, but a lot of people don't do that. They think they have the perfect conditions. The reality is you always have the perfect conditions.
Yeah.
Because what happens between these 2 ears, this 6 inches, that's your real estate. Nobody else owns it unless you give that away to somebody else. Unless you give away your power of happiness, you give away your power of discernment, you give away your power of joy. And so, but at night, so we have to teach people how to shut off the noise and do what your body does best. Our body knows what to do.
Right.
But if we don't get it out of that fight or flight, that sympathetic, high sympathetic that's happening. And when we work out, we want to get a little sympathetic. That's what we want to do. We want to stress the body, but then we want to have the recovery. When Tom Brady, with the world come out in the history of time, will be the reason he played until he was 45 was he took time to recover. He actually says for every 1 minute of exertion, he spends 2 minutes of recovery.
Wow. And
here's a guy that, and I remember him because I'm a University of Michigan fan. I grew up in the area, and he was not the greatest athlete. I mean, they were trying to get rid of him even when he was in college. There was another guy that came in the whole world, but he would never let anybody, he outtrained them, he outthought them, he outperformed them. And he said the real thing that he did, everybody else doesn't do, is recovery.
Wow.
So
let's talk about RB3 users. They know what the burn is. They hear lactic acid, but they don't really understand, right? They understand, I work out, my muscle gets stronger, but they notice energy and cognitive improvement and less depression, right? And
yes.
They hear me talk about brain-derived nootropic factor, but most people doing BFR, they don't really understand the connection. Could you kind of break down that process of, right? Obviously, we know BFR gets us to that lactic acid way easier. What's that doing that turns on the brain? Working here turns this on.
Your muscles are actually pharmaceutical factories. So if your muscles working, it's producing all of those, everything you need as you need it. Could you imagine if you had a car that you never had to put anything in, that just whatever you needed to do, it just had the energy to do it? That's what our cells will do if we give it the right information. We give it the right food, the right rest, the right recovery. So when you think about when you're stressing out the body and you're getting the body to operate, the reason that stress is important and the reason when you're doing the blood flow restriction is we're kind of triggering the way the brain thinks. So it thinks there's something more severe happening than what's happening, but the body knows, the body can handle it. There's been so many people research these little old ladies that pick up cars off their grandchildren. How do they do that? Well, our muscles, we don't even know the capacity of our muscles.
Right.
So what can we really do? We don't have to worry about really hurting ourselves. What we have to do is we're limiting our brain's capacity and our body's capacity to work with our muscles. But as we get these muscles to work and the fibers to work the right way, and what's connected, the connected tissue to those muscles, that is actually like like fiber optics, if you will. It's sending information. So before you need it, your body is already giving you the energy, the resources you need. And so as you build more muscle, what the brain is doing is saying, hey, we're going to need this capacity. And that's really what we need today. Nobody's going to take away stress in your life. But what we can do is we can give you capacity to handle it. And if you don't have capacity, which means you don't have the physical fortitude to handle the stresses that are happening in your life, you won't make it past the 6 o'clock news. You'll be passed out and somebody will be waking you up saying, hey, you got to go back into bed and let's rinse and repeat tomorrow and do it again. Because your muscles are what's going to do that. Your muscles are the factory that are going to make those brain-derived neurotropic factors. And it's a lot of factors. I mean, we could probably do a 3-day workshop just on those, and they have. But the reality is that they're the ones that make you feel good. When you have oxytocin, when you woke up and it was the right time you put the right music on, you got the right phone calls, you're in the right place, you put your B3 bands on, you're doing your workout. At the end of it, you go, man, I don't want my 20 minutes to be done. But
Right.
hey, I've got to, the 20 minutes is done. Now you're going to move on to the next. So we have to learn everything is in moderation. So we build our muscles at the time when it's time to build muscles. We got to build our brain when it's time to build our brain. Now the whole thing is we got to use it in our life, because just by having these experiences doesn't mean anything. So what the brain is always doing when you're physically working out, the brain's thinking, gosh, I used to do this when I was younger. Guess what the brain starts thinking about? All the things you did when you were younger. Now it has
That's one of the reasons why people commonly say, I feel 15, 20 years younger. It's like your body recognized, oh, you used to do that. You used to work your muscles when you were younger and have muscles. And all of a sudden, I mean, in a very short period of time, it's very common for our people to say, man, I feel 20 years younger. Now the muscle may not be coming back that quick. It's coming, but the feeling and the cognitive and
right.
that
what they say is they call it muscle memory, right? They'll say our muscles have memories, but really it's our neurology that has memory. So
that's interesting. There's the world's strongest man, Mitchell Hooper, is a BFR guy, and here's a guy who's the strongest, and he does BFR every session. And I watched a video and I listened to Mitchell, and he said something that I had known about, but I never repeated and never heard a strength guy say, I do BFR because I'm training my nerves in a way I can't with traditional heavy load. I am stimulating my nervous system to make me better, stronger, whatever.
That's a great way to say it, because that's what I was trying to say before. Is we're faking the brain out, but the brain then thinks this is the way it's going to be, even when you're not with the bands. It's going to start to predict your future with these greater resources. And what we know epigenetically, which is a science that's now coming into a foreground, because when they said they mapped the human genome, they didn't. They basically said they only mapped 1%. But the 99% of everybody listening here, you change every 40 seconds. Every DNA pair. So if you bring more energy to the equation, we were talking about earlier, more energy to the equation, guess what? You bring your best self to that equation. So if you're in a relationship, you bring your best self to that relationship. When you're in business negotiations, you bring your best self to that negotiation. If you have we're all going to have letdowns. I mean, there's no, the sun only shines, the seasons are because we have to have time to have winter. There's always going to be that time. Nothing ever blooms all the time. That'd be unrealistic to think everything's going to be rosy all the time. But when we're in the states of little depression, which is normal, it's not a bad thing. I know I can go kick myself in the butt and put on my B3 bands, upgrade my neurophysiology. I don't have to be in a pity party anymore. I can be going, hey, this is being revealed to me, so I can do something about it.
So every time you're putting the bands on and stimulating that neurophysiology, the brain sees that as a stressor, but causes adaptation, right? Because you're basically telling the brain, hey, I want to be strong, I want to have muscle, I want to burn fat, I want to be mobile, I want to function better.
And we actually say that exact thing to every person that comes in with cognitive decline. They think they have to do more crossword puzzles. They think they have to do more. No, you've got to get more muscle.
Yeah.
That muscle will give you your brain power. If you don't have muscle, you can't have brain power. Because you go to any assisted living facility, the ones that are getting the most assistance have the least amount of muscle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's that brain, that muscle brain, I've heard it called the biodirectional relationship. If you're losing your muscle, your brain's not far behind, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we're in a constant race, right? I mean, even the greats in physical fitness, what's his name? The guy, Al Carter, who did the mini tramp and figured out, he was one of the first ones to ever figure out how to get more muscle after astronauts went into space, because the biggest problem with people going into space was they had muscle atrophy.
Yeah.
And when they had muscle atrophy, then they started getting psychological problems. They're going, what? This muscle thing is psychological?
Wow.
The weird thing is they have all that science, but they don't tell anybody about it. Because they go, oh no, you just need this pill.
Right.
No, if you're on a pharmaceutical, I'm not saying get off those, get with your doctor, but I'm going to tell you, do some research, because there's never been a pharmaceutical that's been approved for longer than 14 days of use. 14 days. How many SSRIs are given for 14 days? Most doctors and a lot of my friends will say, you'll start to notice it in 28 days. Well, what are you noticing? The placebo, or is it the real thing? Because what's really making this change happen? You know, all you have to do is think of when you've forgot your phone at home. How stressful is it until you get back to get your phone? If you're listening, I'm just using that as an example. So when you think about the behaviors and the patterns we have, so when you think about, when we talk about the connection between the brain and the muscles, there's no bigger connection on the planet. We wouldn't need our big brain if we didn't have, I mean, we wouldn't have our big brain if we didn't have our big muscles, and we wouldn't have our big muscles if we didn't have our big brain. There's not one without the other. You can't, I mean, if we were Cro-Magnums, they were much stronger, faster. They should have taken us out, right? Homo sapiens didn't have a chance, but we had a brain. We could think. So it's not brute strength, it's a balance. It's having the agility to know. And I think now the current athlete, we're all athletes. We just don't know it. You know, and so whatever your athletic level of performance is, whether it's just to go to the grocery store, take care of your business, or take care of your home, take care of your family, whatever it is, you have to keep a level of physical activity to maintain that. If you don't, after the age of 27, you're never going to win. You can't let nature, when you say, I'm just going to let nature take its course. Well, have you seen what nature does?
Yeah.
Gravity's a bitch, right? So you gotta work against gravity.
Doc, why does somebody who goes for a walk respond differently? And you've kind of hit on it. It's not a very stressful situation to go for a walk or do some light yoga or do some stretching versus somebody who will do high intensity exercise or BFR and get a totally different response, right? I know what we feel. You and I, we put the bands on, we feel the burn, but you mentioned it earlier. Why is that stress adaptative for the brain and the muscle? And why is walking and all this light stuff we do typically, maybe it's just slowing down deterioration, but it's certainly, I've never heard somebody say, I go for a walk and I got my 6-pack and I got my guns and my brain, right? I feel 20 years younger and man, I'm sleeping again. You don't hear that. Why is that?
Yeah. Well, those are things we should be doing anyway. I mean, you shouldn't get a congratulations because you got up and walked across the room or went for a walk after you had something to eat. These are things our body should be doing. But if we want to anticipate and build resilience for the future, we got to go beyond where we are now. Mm-hmm. There's not an athlete that doesn't train for something greater than. You don't train for what you've been through. You train through what you're going to go through. So if you can pretend, oh, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to do this when I get older. No, there's no better time to have a breakthrough than right now. You don't have to have a breakdown to have a breakthrough. Today is the day to do that, and you have to challenge yourself. So one of the things I started doing a long time ago, in fact, when I first went into business for myself, which was in 1982. I vowed every day I would do something that would outlive me when I was home. And so I do every day. I create something with this podcast or I write an article or I do a session, something, because I need to challenge myself. And then I thought, I got to challenge myself physically too. It can't just be mentally, because I was a cerebral. I went from being this artistic kid to being a cerebral guy that was, and but we need to challenge. What are you going to do today to challenge yourself physically?
Right.
You can't go for a walk and go, I'm gonna see if I can outwalk you today. No, but what if you when you start to push yourself, and there's something that happens when we challenge ourselves. There was a study done during COVID that's a really seminal study, which showed when people looked at COVID as a threat, or they looked at COVID as a challenge, that their bodies, their mitochondria actually produced 200 times less light energy when they looked at it as a threat. They call that the cell danger response. So let's say you're just doing it to just get by, and you're just, because you're afraid, you have to put on your mask because you're afraid. All these things. You have a powerful immune system. Every cell of your body is a thinking machine. it can handle whatever comes its way. I mean, look at people like Wim Hof. If the listeners have never heard of, just
Yeah.
Google Wim Hof in YouTube. They inject this guy with poison. He breathes it out of his body, and he's alive right now. It's not some mystical person that lived 2,000 years ago. He's a real guy right now, and he's teaching other people to do it. So that means our physiology, if we unlock the muscles through our breath, through our exercise, and what we know is with the blood flow restriction bands is that you don't have to be a genius to do this. You just follow the rules. You just put them on for 20 minutes, do your exercises, pretend you're doing exercises even. I mean, we've started people out that couldn't even move their body.
Right.
We said, just use your mind, just put them on. They go, well, nothing's happening. Because there's something happening. Because there's still blood flow trying to get through there. The brain is still, because it's a brain thing before it's a body thing. But then once the body-brain connection happens, powerful changes happen in their physiology and psychology. And they can't be they're not separate. You cannot separate those two. If you're going to somebody out there in the world right now that thinks they're separate, they're in the wrong universe. Because right now, especially through the world of biohacking, that we realize that my sleep controls my physical performance. There's not, what I eat is going to affect my physical performance. The way I train is going to affect my physical performance. All of these things, it's like beads on a string. And what I always tell people is, look at what's out there that's working, a proven system that's working, and imitate it. Why would you want to recreate it?
Right.
Use what's already working out there. And for me, I mean, when I tell people, when they go, I don't have time to go to the gym, I go, I don't want you to go to the gym. I want you to go right across the room to your bedroom, put these on, pump them up.
Yeah.
Even if
BFR bands
first I tell them, I go, don't even do anything. Just put them on for 20 minutes. Walk around the house for 20 minutes. They go, and then of course I'm coaching them. So then a couple weeks later, I go, what's going on? Oh, well, I got them on, so I might as well do something. Yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah.
And then because once you start feeling that burn, that lactic acid, and you start to build those. When I used to run the quarter mile, so I knew a lot about lactic acid. And the burn when you're running around they called it the bear. And the muscle sees up. But once you get that buffering effect at the muscle level, and you start to have that buffering effect gives you a high. So that now what used to be a challenge for other people, or a threat to other people, I should say, now that we're using that kind of language, what used to be a threat for other people now becomes a challenge for you. How can you rise above that? How can your physiology and your psychology meet that moment with such power and grace and then if you don't do it, so what? Okay, well, I didn't do it so well yesterday, but today I get to go put the bands back on. I get to train for life. And if you can look at your life not as something that happens to you again, but something that happens through you. What are you training for today? What relationships do you want to improve? What lives do you want to change? You've got to be that inside you first, and then it shows up in your community.
Yeah. Well, I know this. When I know this, I don't know all the science, but when I do my BrainTap, I have a different psyche. I sleep better. I have more positive thoughts about where I'm going. I can visualize, where I'm going with this company, which is a different story. When I do my bands, and I'm going to be 61 here. I've got 3 joints replaced. I've got arthritis everywhere. When I don't do these things, Doc, right? Man, depression, it's right around the corner. Pain, I can't go up and down steps like I start losing my muscle. I mean, if you don't challenge yourself and use these things on a regular basis, I mean, it's not long, especially when we get into our middle ages, that you start losing it really quick, don't you?
What's incredible, just what you just said, once we can get people past that 21 days, 21 days isn't the finish. 21 days is to get you started.
Yeah.
But once you start that habit, you don't want to feel that bad again. You don't want to feel those pains. And I might wake up like on a trip where I start to feel a little sore, and maybe, that subconscious starts getting into me saying, well, you're 63, blah, blah, blah. I'll say, bullshit. I don't know. We know I don't know the extent of my cells. I don't know what God has gifted me with. I do know how I can stop it if I don't do the things that I know to do. But that's what I'm saying. Every morning, if you get up and just think of your life as you're challenged every moment to show up as your best self. So you can either say, oh, well, that's the way it was. If I thought about my grandparents, when my grandpa was my age, he was dead a year later.
Yeah.
I never saw him get off the couch. He was always smoking a cigar.
Mm-hmm.
He deserved it. He had worked his whole life.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, he
go,
earned it, didn't he?
yeah, he earned all his limitations, and it's like, no, we're the first generation that doesn't want to get old.
Yeah. Yeah, we
You
don't
know,
have to, I tell people I might be chronologically 60, but when I do these things, I don't feel 60. I don't function 60.
right?
I don't think I look 60, right? It's interesting. 38 of the 200 people I graduated high school with are already dead. And I went to a class reunion a couple of years ago, and I mean, people thought I was in the wrong place. Like, who are you? And I tell them, they're like, you're DeBord? I'm like, and they're like, what do you do? I said, well, I exercise every day. I get lactic, I live on elevated growth hormone and all this other cocktail of neurotransmitters you're talking about, which as I evolve in my teaching with BFR, it's interesting. We don't, my perspective now that I teach people is you don't have to, right, settle for the current limitation, and you certainly don't have to, you know, live your chronological age. 60, you can be 9, or 60, you can be 20. Just depends if you're accessing all these anabolic and neurotransmitter systems that are there your whole life. Well, Doc,
Wayne Dyer was probably one of the
thoughts on, on obviously the BrainTap. We're going to share more with people, but parting thoughts on, what you've seen with BFR and, what you would encourage people to keep doing with it.
Well, at least at a minimum 3 times. The reason 72 hours, a lot of people don't realize physiologically what's happening is your nervous system is going to try to adapt. Mm-hmm. So if you can stress it out a little bit in this healthy stress, this U stress, which is healthy stress, every 72 hours, the brain will continue to anticipate that growth hormone you're talking about, triggering that human growth hormone, because it's going to want you to succeed. Mm-hmm. But if you don't do something, then the brain will start when we atrophy, that's also a slippery slope, right? Once the muscle's gone, how do you get it back? Now, the nice thing is that we know through sciences now that we can build muscle back. So whoever that if they just, I've had people in wheelchairs, like I was saying, that once they start doing this and they couldn't even move muscles, but they get their mind in it, they start doing it, they start breathing, they start just physically, mentally, and emotionally, and eventually those muscles will kick in because we're designed to adapt. We're adaptive creatures. Mm-hmm. And when we're more than this physical body, of course, but when you think about the energy that makes up who we are, we've got to know that there's more to life than just living and dying. Mm-hmm. And so many people along the way think, oh, well, I'm supposed to get old, I'm supposed to get age, I'm supposed to become senile. If you tell people, tell me, if they don't know anything like we're talking about, just meet somebody in the street and say, tell me the history of your life.
Right.
No, I want to rewrite that. Like I said, I want you and I to be in 30 years from now, we're on the podcast again, or whatever it is, a virtual whatever reality thing. And we're physically fit, our brain's about us. We're talking and saying, we changed the way people thought about their future, because you don't have to take what mom and dad told you or grandpa. Right. You can be as young as you want to be. When Wayne Dyer said, never let an old person inhabit your body, he really meant it. You want to be youthful, but you got to do. It's not a thing that you can't just think about it. I mean, you have to think about it, bring it about, live it, breathe it. It's got to be a life. It's got to be a passion for you. And a lot of times, just like any other passion, it's going to take some blood, sweat, and tears. Sometimes you're going to have to do it when you don't want to do it. But that's when it's going to be, the victory is going to be that much better. When you realize, and then when you can look over and you saw somebody that, at the same time as you, said, that's hogwash, and you got to tell them, you could have been with me, but let's get you going, because you can. One thing I like about both our technologies, as long as they're still breathing, there's a chance.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what's amazing. It's like the body's got that set point and it wants to go back there, but it needs that challenge, and the brain needs that, that challenge, or, those frequencies that you introduce to go into these thetas and these alphas, and the muscles need that challenge. Well, that's awesome. Well, Doc, thanks for sharing that with us today. For the listeners, we're going to put this link out there. Look, I've been using BrainTap ever since I met Patrick. So this has been going on about 5 years, and I'll tell you, it makes a huge difference in my sleep. It makes a huge difference in my mental outlook, how I look at my relationship, how I look at my business. And I'll tell you, it's easy to fall into negative thoughts, but I've noticed that it is so much easier for me to stay on focus with my positive thoughts, helping people with my company, helping my family, having a great relationship. And I give a huge credit of that to BrainTap. So we'll get the link in the bottom here as we wrap up the podcast. And in the future, I know we're probably going to have you back, Dr. Porter, and talk more, because, it's interesting. The last thought I have is, I have an advisory board, and what I find interesting between what you're doing and we're doing, it's almost like we're ahead of the science. And like every 6 months or year, isn't it interesting? The science comes out and says, oh yeah, if you do this with the brain, and you've already been doing it and saying the same thing about getting away from these hours-long stressful workouts and doing these quick 10 to 20 minutes. It's interesting how the science is almost trying to catch up with us, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. Well, when you're on the right path, I think I'm not the kind of guy that likes what's standard, or what everybody else is doing. I'm always looking for a better way that works for me. And once it works for me, I'm going to share it with everybody. So, that's why every person that comes through here, we have them here at our lab here in New Bern. If you come here, we don't have I used to have a physical gym. Mm-hmm. Now we just have the BFR bands, and I could use that space for other things that we can use at the clinic, because we want to build muscle, but they're only here for a short time. If I was, I'd probably still have some of those some of my side back and stuff like that later. But those are just fun things you do. But they can't go with me on the road. And
right.
And as I age, I'm not going to be in the gym for 3 or 4 hours. Being a gym rat, like I was when I was younger. So no, I appreciate it. And, we're going to keep sharing the B3 story with our people. And if somebody wants to try it, you're going to give them the links. They can try ours for 14 days free. There's a free trial.
Yeah, we're going to put the link in there, and I'm going to encourage people to take it, and the last thing I'll share with you is, they've got this awesome library that you can subscribe to. So you can pick all kinds of different things to, for the treatments of BrainTap, what I love. I've played around and I've got my favorites, but you're going to love it if you get the BrainTap on. So we're going to give you the link to learn more about this science. And you talk about a way to magnify your results with BFR bands. I think you just found it in BrainTap. So Dr. Porter, thanks for being on the podcast today. Thanks for sharing.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me.